I'm Lou. I'm going to tell you about 5 of my recommended geeky reads. So I'm just going to jump straight in and tell you about the books that I think are worth a read. The first book is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. It's a really great book about a young girl who is entered into a wizard's duel by her father, who is somewhat less than charming and not likely to win Parent of the Year anytime soon. She's pitted against a boy who has been apprenticed and trained purely in order to defeat her. They both end up working at this circus called the Night Circus because it is only open at night. It travels around the world and it gets a kind of cult following about this circus and its reputation, and the duel, the fight between the two characters, is incredibly clever. It's not you know, Harry versus Voldemort, you know, I cast this spell, you cast that spell kind of duel kind of fight. Basically the duel is them trying to outdo each other and outdo each other's magical skill and ability. This book has really fantastic secondary characters and secondary storylines as well. It's not exactly a happy ending, but a really great book worth a read, and if you're anything like me, you will come away really wanting to visit this circus. Next on my list is Dreams and Shadows by C. Robert Cargill. I bought this book purely on the basis of the cover, and I'm really glad that I did. At first glance it's quite whimsical, you know, it alludes to the fact that there's kind of magic and mystery in the book, but actually if you really look at the cover, especially if you go back and look at it after you've read the book, you'll notice that actually it's a little bit darker and it's got a lot more darker undertones than it appears to have on first glance, and that really is kind of what this book is about. If you're a supernatural fan, which I am, this book will really appeal to you. It's about a young boy called Colby who is befriended by a genie who grants him some wishes, and one of his wishes is to learn about magic in the world, which is great, and he does, and you know, it brings him amazement and wonder that he's learning about all these things that are out there that he had no idea about, but equally that then puts him in danger because once he knows about them he can be hurt by them. It's about how he deals with learning about these things that, you know, to everyone else are either fantasy or nightmare. It's also about growing up because Colby grows up throughout the book. It's also a book about friendship, particularly childhood friendship, and the lengths that people will go to protect their friends. Definitely not a happy ending. It's a fantastic book, it really is, and leads really well onto my third recommendation, which is Queen of the Dark Things, which is the sequel to Dreams and Shadows. When I saw that there was a second book, I was quite surprised. I wasn't expecting a sequel. The ending of the first book doesn't necessarily make you think that there's going to be a sequel. It picks up about 6 months after the ending of the first one, where Colby is trying to deal with the events that occur at the end of that first book. You know, it's still very much about him finding his way, in particular dealing with loss. But it also, what it brilliantly does is the first book, you know, does skip from childhood to adulthood very quickly. In this one, we go back and revisit that period and see what happened in some of the intervening years. So my fourth book that I'm recommending is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. Any of you that are Ghibli fans like me will know that this is one of the most famous Ghibli films, which features Christian Bale as Wizard Howl. I am a big believer in reading a book before seeing the film adaptation of it. When I bought this book, I didn't know that the book came before the film, so I started reading it and I was noticing some of the changes in the storyline from the film, and I was a bit put out, you know, a bit annoyed. I was thinking, well, why have they changed that? What's the point? So then when I actually went back and looked at the dates, I realised that the book came quite a while before the film did. And then I sort of read it maybe with a bit more of an open mind, and actually it's a really good story. There are also other books in this house series. I haven't read any of the others yet, but I will be, because I'd just be really interested to see some more adventures of Wizard Howl and his moving castle. Okay, so my last recommendation is actually a graphic novel by Benjamin Reed and Chris Wildgoose called Porcelain. It's a gothic fairy tale. It's a really easy read. I read it all in one sitting in about an hour. The story does move at quite a pace. I think in part because it's a graphic novel and they tend to move at a pace anyway, but I also think it's because it's a new graphic novel, because the readers aren't quite invested in the storyline and in the character at the beginning. They need to move it along quite quickly. But it was a really good book, or a really good graphic novel. If you like dark fairy tales, which I love, then this is a really good one. And the artistry and the illustrations in it absolutely match it fantastically. It is a dark mystical story about a young girl who's by all accounts kind of an orphan, coming into a household where there's clearly some tragedy and some mystical forces at work. I'm not really going to say much more about the actual plot because it is quite a short story. I could easily give it all away and I don't want to do that. So those are my 5 recommendations. I hope that you will read some of them and that you will enjoy them as well. Let me know in the comments what you think of them, and if you have any suggestions for me to read. I'm always looking for more books to put on my ever-growing reading list. That's it for this one. I'm going to do some more recommended reads videos in the future. I think the next one's probably going to be dystopian books and storylines, so I'll see you then.